say they're going on a rent strike. It could be the biggest one Parkdale has ever seen.
Hundreds of residents in Parkdale have refused to pay rent, fighting back against rent increases in their neighborhood. Now tonight, they plan to take their action to the next level.
They're now planning to expand by doubling the number of buildings participating in the rent strike from 6 to 12 next month.
Well, the rent strike here in Parkdale hit a new level today as residents set their sights on the decision maker. They stormed the hallways of the tribunal, demanding the property manager, Metcalf, scrap the above guideline rent increases for the entire neighborhood.
The two sides are now sitting down to talk and could be close to an agreement. For these tenants, getting to sit across the table from corporate giants is vindicating after months of fear and criticism over their tactics. What once seemed like an impossible task has now empowered an entire community. They hope others across the city can see them as an example that no corporation is too big to take on.
One of the reasons why I picked Parkdale as a neighborhood, because there was a great community aspect, so it just kind of feels less like you're alone in a big city. There's quite a few people that I see riding their bikes, taking their kids to school. It's just a very welcoming community, and I really enjoy that.
When I first moved here, I was a little bit afraid because Parkdale has a bad rep, but I soon learned that it's one of the safest neighborhoods in the city.
You know, I like the fact that Parkdale is sort of close to everything. So, you know, we got the Gardner right here, so it's easy access to get onto the freeways and highways. But yet we're still in the heart of downtown. You know, downtown is really only 5 minutes, 10 minutes away.
I like living by the lake and that cool breeze in the summertime.
I used to live in the north end of Toronto, and neighbors weren't as friendly, you know, more well-to-do and keeping to themselves.
Parkdale has a large low-income tenant population. We have a ton of high-rise apartment buildings, and for the most part, they're folks that have lived in the neighborhood for a very long time.
People knows me in Parkdale, and I could go anywhere, and everybody's friendly. They're helpful, and that's why I love Parkdale.
90% of the 20,000 people that live in this neighborhood are renters, and of them, a higher than average proportion are paying over 50% of their wages to rent directly.
It's a community that is used to working class struggles. People know that we need to work together and we need to kind of get on the same page if we're going to see changes in our neighborhood.
For decades, Parkdale has been a neighborhood where struggle has taken place between working class, poor tenants and their landlords or their bosses or the government.
It's a friendly neighborhood and people look out for one another.
I met my first neighbor on the day I moved in. He just said, "Welcome to the neighborhood," gave me a magnet that I still have in my fridge, and that's just one of the things that I've loved about Parkdale since day one.
It's a nice place to live.
Parkdale is really diverse, and it's really welcoming to lots of different folks who are able to start families and stay in the neighborhood for a very long time. People feel really supported, and there's a lot of community services that are really in tune with different communities that they're serving.
There are over 20 primary languages spoken in the neighborhood, and it has a high number of new arrivals from other countries to Canada living here.
As a refugee, I've been living in other countries like Nepal and India, and I never had this sense of belonging. And this sense of belonging, that's the comfort zone for a new immigrant, so that you don't get lost in a new country, a new culture.
Although we Tibetan people came here as a refugee, scattered all over in Canada, majority people are staying in Parkdale area.
First impressions can often be deceiving, especially if you're visiting Parkdale for the first time. Gritty, often in your face, this neighborhood is now on the gentrification fast track. How could it not be? Look where it is.
Cash rules everything around me. Green, get the money. Dollar bill, yo.
People have talked about Parkdale facing gentrification for maybe 20 years now. And I think the word gentrification can sometimes make that process a little unclear for people. When the process itself is very clear in our neighborhood, it's a process of displacement.
It is mostly a phenomenon of force, of economic and physical force exerted on working class people that destroys working class lives and working class neighborhoods.
Rents are there increasing, and if they increase too much rent, we cannot afford.
Landlords trying to kick out tenants so that they can get new tenants from which they can get more money.
The landlord tries to get that tenant out so that they can do very surface level renovations on the unit, give them new appliances, a new coat of paint, and then they can jack up the rent, sometimes 50%, and get a new sort of tenant into the building. So not the working class tenants that live in Parkdale, not the immigrant families that live in Parkdale, but generally young, professional, well-off, white tenants.
And also the state plays into it as well. Deportations have gutted this neighborhood in a lot of really severe ways. Up until only recently, this had been a neighborhood in which a large number of Roma and Sinti Hungarian and Czech refugees came, and through the concerted effort of the state, they were systematically removed from this neighborhood and deported back to really deplorable conditions.
There's large parts of our community that are missing.
We Tibetans have been living here for almost now 15-20 years, so it seems that this gentrification is disintegrating the social vibrancy in Parkdale, so that's really disheartening to see that.
Parkdale is a poor neighborhood and everybody help each other, but other people move in this area, they acting like differently, like they are more important than you, and you've been living a long time.
Different kind of local spots closing.
They put in a Starbucks, that's changed. The banks are moving out, that's not a good thing.
I know the CIBC closed down, and I believe the intent is to put up some condo complexes there.
And we have 2 condo projects moving in, and that's just the beginning. That's the thin edge of a very thick wedge, I think. So yeah, I think it's a real issue for Parkdale is gentrification. Liberty Village is just across Dufferin and is moving in this direction.
My name is Casey Stewart. I'm a Toronto-based lifestyle blogger, and today I'm in Liberty Village, one of my favorite hoods, and I'm going to show you around. Liberty Village! Whee! Get a coffee and a latte.
Liberty Village is kind of a created community. It was a lot of old warehouses in the neighborhood that have slowly turned into a huge condo development.
Another version of condo land, essentially.
It is not like single-family homes. It is not large apartment buildings. Like, it is a very intentionally designed, like, professional development that is designed in a way to keep homeless people out.
Brew pubs and bistros and that kind of environment.
Your 24-hour metro, expensive nail salons and waxing facilities.
And here's a spot if you want to get a mani-pedi on Sunday with your bestie.
They wanted to make this a Liberty Village West, but it's not Liberty Village West, it's Parkdale.
Like when I see Liberty Village coming to Parkdale, I see things being more expensive. I see more and more changes in terms of the gentrification and the types of people that are moving into the neighborhood that may not care about the neighborhood as much as we'd like them to.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar, dollar bill, yo.
For a lot of people in Toronto, or even people who heard about the rent strike outside of Toronto, it seemed like it started very suddenly, that it was this huge struggle of hundreds of working class tenants that just popped out of thin air. But the reality is that it didn't pop out of thin air.
I had seen flyers kind of going about either on lampposts or flyers in my building, or just kind of there's a bit of a buzz just happening. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I knew that I wanted to learn more about it. So I reached out to Parkdale Organized, and then that's kind of where the ball started rolling.
I heard about Parkdale Organized. Somebody put a flyer on my door. So that's how I first got involved.
Parkdale Organized is really, they have done a good job.
The group Parkdale Organized says they don't know just yet what their next project will be. For now, they're taking a much-deserved break after months of organizing.
Parkdale Organized is a group of people who have come together to organize in our neighborhood, and people who are hoping to build the working class power in the neighborhood so that we can take control of the place that we live.
A handful of people came together to try and put an organization to the struggles that people in the neighborhood had been facing. Working class people face a myriad of individual struggles within the neighborhood. The idea was to collectively, through solidarity and direct action, deal with those issues.
Before the rent strike, Parkdale Organized had been around for maybe 3-4 years. And we had been organizing building by building, knocking on doors in places where people had been facing rent increases, disrepair, pest problems, and telling people that the thing that they needed to do was get together with their neighbors and confront their landlord directly. We had organized at first slowly in a few buildings, and it was always a hard sell. Who are you people? Why are you knocking on my door? What is it that you want me to do? And we started to have successes.
Initially, struggles around a major new player in the real estate market, Achilles, which is a real estate fund based in Scandinavia that bought up a bunch of buildings up and down the boulevards in Parkdale.
Tenants at a Parkdale apartment building are fighting back against their property owners.
188 Jameson, they are doing rent strike.
I know people on 188 where some of my relatives live also. They had this problem for a few months long before.
Other struggles that had kind of given a bit broader conception of what it is that working people struggle against in this neighborhood was a worker-initiated strike over at the food terminal. It's a major food hub, the largest in Southern Ontario, I think the largest in Ontario generally, that employs a lot of tenants in Parkdale. They went on strike and people from the neighborhood supported them as well.
Once we had started getting those successes, our organizing became a much easier pitch when we went to people's doors. People had heard of us before. We started to be able to just buzz up to a random unit in a building and say, hey, we're from Parkdale Organized, we want to come talk to you about something. And people would always invite us in.
Those campaigns started to put a different idea out there within the neighborhood, which was that the struggles that people find themselves faced with are not individual struggles and don't need to be dealt with individually. That organizing around those issues, not just protesting, not just registering dissent, not just complaining about them, was something that could be done.
So when this situation presented itself, when Metcalf ridiculously applied for above guideline rent increases in several buildings throughout the neighborhood all at once, this rent strike, it emerged from all of that previous organizing. It for sure took the actions of some brave tenants in those buildings, but it had also taken a lot of groundwork to get the neighborhood to a point where it was ready for this type of struggle. Metcalf is one of two large landlords in the neighborhood, those being Metcalf and Achilles.
Brent Merrill is the CEO now of Metcalf, also directly owns some of the buildings in the neighborhood.
He's a greedy pig. He's not thinking about poor people, he's thinking only about himself.
If they increase each and every year the rent, then really we are facing problem.
I've been here for 3 years and I've gotten those rent increases year after year. A lot of the tenants that have been here for a lot longer than I've been, for decades on top of it, from the stories that they've been telling, they've been going through those types of things for years and years and years. There's always been an above guideline rent increase.
An above guideline rent increase is an extra rent increase that landlords are allowed to ask for on top of the annual provincial guideline. The Ontario government says landlords are allowed a certain amount, and when the landlord has done extra work in the building, if they have done some capital expenditures that cost a lot of money, they're allowed to pass on these costs to the tenants to a maximum of 9% over 3 years on top of a guideline amount. So there's the idea that things can remain affordable because of rent control is actually quite a farce.
1% on, let's say, a standard $1,000 is what, $10, right? $15 to 1.5%. Whereas now you're asking for $4, so $40 a month. It may sound trivial in the small run, but you know, for some of the people that live in this area, it's a lot of blue-collar working class people and a lot of people that just came into the country, you know, so some people have to make decisions on whether they put that extra money to rent or, you know, spend that money on groceries. Or for some other people, it's them staying in the building or not.
It's not just kind of my personal position in it, it's knowing that an entire neighborhood and my friends and people that I would call family are suffering along with me because they are unable to pay their rent for these unrealistic increases.
People have tried to fight these above guideline rent increases in the past, but they were never winning. Like, the law was not set up for tenants to win, so they had to come up with a new strategy if we were going to kind of take on the law and the landlord.
An opinion had started to form in the neighborhood that we had had enough with the treatment that we had faced. We had had enough of our neighbors being pushed out of our buildings one by one, month after month, and that we were going to do something about it. And that the something we were going to do about it was going to involve direct action, and it was not going to be about advocacy, it was not going to be about lobbying, it was not going to be about raising awareness, because all of those avenues had failed us.
Rent strike was a tactic that had been discussed by various tenants doing various struggles up until this point, but a critical mass was kind of achieved where enough people were talking about it, enough people felt confident about the experiences that they had already been through, that they were willing to take it on.
It started with 87 Jameson. They were the first ones to go on rent strike.
We decided to hold back the rent for a certain time and see how he's going to respond. And he wasn't too happy.
From that, more conversations started in different buildings around 87 Jameson, like on the same street, in the same neighborhood, to talk about if there was more people involved in this rent strike, if there was more people talking to each other and organizing, then we can be a lot more effective in taking on the landlord.
87 Jameson temporarily called off their rent strike, and initially tenants from that building and members from Parkdale Organized set out to make contact with other tenants in other Metcalf buildings.
I think the other buildings came on board because we had people coming, organizing lobby meetings.
Learning what they'd been going through and how what they were suffering through was similar to what I'd been going through in my own building, or same thing that I'd seen other neighbors go through as well, just the unresponsiveness from Metcalf.
For me personally, it was a pest control issue and the lack of follow-up by Metcalf in terms of cockroaches and mice.
I joined the rent strike because of just the way Metcalf treats people. They treat you like a second-class citizen, and I just thought it was time for a correction in attitude. I was happy to join the rent strike.
And the fact that there's a fantastic community they want to organize, I was just like, it's time.
In March, we went to Metcalf's corporate head office on Richmond Street.
I think there was about 70 or 80 of us that went down to the landlord's office all together.
They locked us out, they wouldn't take our repair requests, they phoned the police, they told us we were trespassing.
Come down and talk to the people that live in the buildings that you are making millions of dollars off of. Where are you? Where are you? Let's go! Cowards! Let's see a face to the bank account that we're filling.
We managed to get up to their front door, and they were behind the glass laughing at us. That's how they viewed us. It's not the first time they've been protested, and they thought this was another flash in the pan, it would just go away. And this time it didn't go away.
So tenants in this neighborhood are used to having meetings in their lobbies. So we just had a meeting in the landlord's lobby to talk about, like, this was really disrespectful. The landlord doesn't even want to speak to their own tenants. They're not addressing issues they're legally required to address. Let's talk about doing a rent strike in the neighborhood.
We need to decide on what the next steps are for fighting these rent increases and for getting the units fixed up.
We came here today to try to appeal to them as people, and they wouldn't even address us, so clearly the only thing that matters is money, so that's probably the direction we're going to have to go.
We got to do something, we got to stop, because they are indifferent to us, they are disrespectful, they are disregarding our concerns, so we got to go on rent strike.
So we came back, tried to think of next steps. The next steps was to follow the same line that 87 was on and go on the rent strike.
That was a process that involved lots of door knocking, lots of lobby meetings, mass meetings, as well as escalating actions of engagement against Metcalf.
And the rest is sort of history now.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
lobby meetings were organized, I believe, by Parkdale organized. A few people would show up and talk to us about what the living conditions were like and about the rent increases we were facing. And that way we started to get to know one another and sort of explore what was happening and what we could do about it.
I think lobby meetings help because you had time to get opinions from different people, different tenants, learn how to strategize.
The lobby meeting is exactly what it sounds like. They are among the only public spaces in our buildings where more than 4 people can get together and discuss anything. So a lot of times at the building level, that's where the meetings take place.
And we all talk about what's going on and what our next step and what we plan to do. So we be keeping meeting in the lobby very often.
That took myself just going around the building, letting people know when the next lobby meeting will be.
You go around door to door, you knock on people's doors, you have conversations about what's been going on with those people, what it is that they think about it. And you set a date for a number of people to get together from that building and discuss what it is that they're going to do about it.
You know, obviously when they first started, a lot of people were very skeptical, like, what is this?
They can be chaotic sometimes.
It's Parkdale, there's a lot of characters and everybody has something to say. To me, it struck me as being a little bit disorganized at first, but I thought this is worth getting involved in.
It's become more commonplace for people in the neighborhood to have lobby meetings.
People start to know our face, so people would automatically in the building start stopping and start saying, hey, what's going on with this? Well, you know, what's the update? What's the word?
It made me feel I had support going door to door and putting out flyers to let people know what we were all about and what we were hoping to gain by the rent strike.
Our lobby meeting was just, again, a good way to get our neighbors connected and get them informed and make sure that they knew that they weren't alone in the situation.
Some decisions get made, their tasks are divvied up, and then those tasks are carried out, and then you have another lobby meeting to go over what's taken place and make further decisions.
Talking to each other, trying to get a consensus. Important thing is that every tenant get involved, inclusiveness.
No respect! No rent! No repair! No rent! No respect! No rent!
One of the things I enjoyed the most was the march through Parkdale. Lots of support, horn honking, and people waving at us.
The march through Parkdale, which a huge amount of people showed up for.
The day we marched, meeting in front of the library and standing there with a few of my friends and taking up space and being loud and unapologetic about the fact that we weren't going to tolerate Metcalfe's behavior any longer, and getting out into the community and just like marching around and just picking up people as we went along.
There were so many actions. It kind of took on a life of its own.
Protesting one of the owners in Forest Hill.
Today we're gathered here to go visit Metcalfe at their home, since they're always in our homes saying that they're doing repairs when they're not.
This morning, a few dozen tenants, they boarded a yellow school bus and took their protest right to the front doorstep of one of the property owners.
All that you care about, the money to put in your pocket, that's all. You are getting richer from the tenant, and we are getting poorer and poorer every day. So stop all your bullshit and listen to us. We are strong people in Parkdale, and we will show you how powerful we are.
Going to the tribunal and everyone showing up there.
Inside court, we almost nearly 100 people.
It was a ruckus start at the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal here at Yonge and St. Clair. Protesters delayed the hearing by more than an hour, calling for Metcalfe to give in to their demands.
There was the incident when they tried to run somebody over.
The truck incident was Brent Merrill.
A protest in June saw Metcalfe CEO Brent Merrill narrowly avoid hitting a protester outside one of his buildings.
Having seen the video now, I don't know what would have happened if I had gone under the car as opposed to off to the side. I really thought at some point he would slow down.
It was really shocking, really shocking.
You always expect the worst from Metcalfe. That just blew me away. I mean, that was just, they just took the cake that day.
They had messed up in a massive way. Thankfully, Kevin was all right. But in that moment, I was just like, we've got them.
You know, I don't want to make this the centerpiece of what's going on today. I think that what needs to happen is that they need to recognize that this community is not backing down. We're not leaving.
Not one person do it, all the building, not one person, everybody.
That's the highlight more than anything. That the collective will and the collective strength was being fully accessed in order to carry this out. And that was a hell of a thing to watch and participate in.
My favorite part of the rent strike was the way that it seeped into our everyday lives.
You didn't feel as alone in the building as you may have before, or you knew who was kind of fighting with you.
I think it has been like such a positive thing for the neighborhood. Like I think neighbors are now way more open to having conversations.
For a lot of us, I didn't really talk to a lot of people in my building before this, and now it's it brought people together.
I started running into people on the street that would say hello to me and ask about the rent strike, and it just made for a much closer community.
Yeah, it just helped build the community quite a bit, I feel like.
Even those who are not living in Metcalf tenants were asking what's going on with Metcalf, what's happening now, what's the decision.
It got pretty normal that there would be an impromptu meeting in the produce section of the No Frills. And it was those moments that they were honestly beautiful for me, because so often politics are just wiped from our daily lives. And people might go to a protest on a Saturday, somewhere that's like half an hour transit ride from their house. But this reality of not being able to stand on my balcony, not being able to go out on the street without meeting someone who was in this struggle with me, who had been thinking about it all day just like me, who was worrying about it, who was making plans, and really that feeling that we were in this together. It was the only time in my life when I had really felt that level of camaraderie with the people who I lived with, the people I was surrounded by, and it just added this weight, this content to both our daily lives and the struggle. We were all at home thinking, oh my goodness, what's the next thing I can do? What else can I do to help us win? Because the stakes were so high, it was so real.
And people are really curious about what's going on. And are kind of really hopeful because they see that the tenants are like making some really huge wins and like wondering like, well, how can we do this in our building? Like, how can we get involved?
People wants to do something and they like what is happening.
Seeing the different people that sort of jumped on board along with us to show support. So, Queen Victoria, all the teachers there stood out on the block and made a lot of noise on the corner of King and Jameson, which was really amazing to see.
Hundreds of residents here in Parkdale are heading into their second month refusing to pay rent in protest of rent hikes here in Parkdale. And now they're getting the support of some unlikely allies.
In the heart of South Parkdale, right at the corner of King and Jameson, is a huge elementary school. So many of the kids from South Parkdale go to that school.
The Parkdale Elementary School is surrounded by 19 buildings owned by Metcalf Living. 5 of them are facing rent increases above the provincial maximum.
Conditions of poverty, of displacement, those are things that are felt most strongly by children. And the teachers in the schools are very aware of that. They see it in their students every day. They see when they're tired, they see when they're hungry, they see when they have bed bug bites or when they're afraid that their parents are going to lose their home. They see it when students don't show up at the next school year because they've been displaced from our neighborhood. There were teachers at Parkdale Elementary who tried to take action when Roma students were being deported en masse from the neighborhood. There were, teachers who have talked about the conditions at the school, who have talked about conditions in the neighborhood. But it's always a problem when those actions take the form of just advocacy or raising awareness. Often, the worst conditions that we face are things that are very legal, but are wrong. These above guideline rent increases that have been displacing our neighbors are absolutely legal. And what was so amazing about the support that we had from teachers in the neighborhood was they've seen how this legal regime of above guideline rent increases has stripped our neighborhood of its working class qualities, has forced working class people out of Parkdale, and they were willing, in fact, enthusiastic about the opportunity to support working class people, the parents of their students, in their formation of working class organizations that were capable of taking on the things that are legal but wrong.
I'm in Parkdale where striking tenants are putting away their protest signs and banners now that a 3-month rent strike has ended with a negotiated agreement with the landlord.
Working class people sat down across the table from people that represented hundreds of millions of dollars in capital and didn't budge.
I was there for the negotiation process. Metcalf came and they had various employees from Metcalf, and when their main investors showed up.
Yeah, I think our tenant team really worked well. We had discussions and meetings before the negotiations, and we knew what they were up to, and we knew our demand.
We usually had 1 or 2 representatives from each building who'd been involved in the rent strike all along.
Each of the main buildings that were participating in the rent strike had a couple of building representatives that kind of spread information to the rest of their tenants in their building, as well as speak to all of the tenants in the building to see what people wanted to do moving forward.
At the height, there was close to 300 people on the rent strike, and the people at the bargaining table were about 20 of us.
We went in there with very, very firm demands. We had to negotiate.
Of course, we're not professional negotiators, so it was quite a learning experience for sure.
So Parkdale Community Legal Services worked with those building representatives through negotiations with the landlord and the investment company.
All in all, the negotiation process went really, really well, and it was a very good deal for Parkdale.
I would definitely consider this a win. I think the tenants are really going to want to talk about what the wins were from these negotiations. Unfortunately, the details are confidential.
The numbers are good, so good that Metcalf has required a gag order on the actual specific numbers.
I would say that we won, yes. And there's a lot of people with smiles on their faces in Parkdale.
I think the biggest and most important result of the rent strike is that the rent strike has been recognized by those that carried it out as a tactic, not an end in and of itself, and a tactic that's employed by organizing and by organizations that are developed by working class people. There is a shift socially and politically underway within this neighborhood, and hopefully outside of the neighborhood as well, which is that people are capable of doing things that they are otherwise told by legal convention and economic mandate that they cannot do.
Cheers at a Parkdale building as residents marked the end of a long battle.
Sadly, there's no shortage of things for us to organize around.
So the lesson that people should take is not that they should move to Parkdale. Other neighborhoods can carry out this activity, and other neighborhoods should carry out this activity.
Different type of problems are there, each and every building.
Gentrification is happening all over the city. It's not just in Parkdale. So I think it's important that people get the message that when you stick together, we have a lot more power as a group than we do as individuals.
I would suggest that anyone who's facing high rent increases should get together with their neighbors.
Don't go alone. Get your neighbors involved, be organized, go as one, go as a unified front.
Get organized, meet with people in your building, meet with people outside your building. You're more powerful than you think.
A lot of people were really skeptical. I mean, I remember back in March and even in April when we were starting to organize the rent strike, like even some of the main organizers now were like, you guys are nuts. Like, this is never going to work. Everyone's going to get evicted.
Nobody in this building wanted to get involved. I was the only person. Some people told me, don't rock the boat, it doesn't affect us. But now that the rent strike's over and the negotiations, everybody's just cheering this on, right? This is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Some people are still calling us and ask us about the rent strike. Like, oh, you all did a great job. How you all get started? How you all do this? How you all did that? It makes you feel good that you're making a difference.
I'm happy we woke up very well. I'm emboldened by this strike. I think people are really, now even if strike happens next time, I think more people would join because we had that taste of victory.
There's power in numbers, and we had a loud voice, and our voice was heard.
That's what people in the neighborhood have learned from this experience, is that while there are individual working class people that are commendable, the strength and authority that is latent within the working class generally is something that no other social force can actually touch. And it just has to be organized. And that organization takes a lot of work. The lesson to take is do the work, do the organizing, carry out the action, win the day, and prepare for the next day.